and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. David Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. David is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
And now, a special announcement. Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David. We wanted to make a special announcement before the podcast to let everyone know that we're going to be starting a new free ongoing training group, because we've been talking about the Tuesday group a lot on the podcasts. And David, you've been getting a lot of interest from listeners on how to join the Tuesday group, which you've been running at Stanford for about 20 years, right?
Yes, and it's limited to people from the San Francisco Bay Area, and even at that, we're getting up to like almost 50 people every Tuesday. But Rhonda is so devoted to therapists from all over the world, has gone to Mexico to teach, has gone to India to teach. And I, too, get emails from therapists all over the world. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could have a group at a different time of day, so it would work for people from overseas and from Asia, and get someone really fantastic to lead it, like the brilliant and beautiful Rhonda, or the handsome Richard and brilliant Richard Lamb, or the awesome Dr. Lee Harrington from the Sacramento area. And lo and behold, those three have volunteered to bring you a super new weekly, totally free of charge, mind-blowing team therapy training program. Tell us what you're going to do, Rhonda, and when it's going to be, and how they can contact you if they want to sign up.
Okay. Well, we're going to start on Wednesday, December 2nd, right? Wednesday, December 2nd, and it's going to be from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And the space, like what Dr. Burns said, is going to be limited to about 50 people. So if you're interested in joining this group, please email me, and here's my email address, rhonda@feelinggreattherapycenter.com. That's all one word, rhonda@feelinggreattherapycenter.com. And then once I get your email address, we'll give you some forms to fill out and tell you what the requirements are. You will have to read the ebook and use the tools that Dr. Burns has created. And there will be homework involved. It's not a passive training program. And then, but we welcome everyone from around the world to want to, learn and practice Team CBT with us.
And it's not for the faint of heart, because we use exercises in our groups where you'll be taught a technique. It'll be demonstrated in a role play, and then you'll have to practice it in a role play, and you'll get an immediate grade, like an A, a B, a C, a D. So you have to confront your fear of failure, because the philosophy of the group is learning through joyous failure. That the problem is never failing, because you're going to fail with most of the new techniques you learn at first. The shame is the problem, not failure. Failure is the pathway to learning. And you're in for a heck of a lot of fun. We do personal work sometimes, which is mind-blowing. The tears flow, laughter happens. A lot of people say that the Tuesday group is the greatest time of the week for them. And I'm sure you'll feel the same about Rhonda's new group. But you will have to use the brief mood scale with every patient at every session, with no exceptions. That's going to make you accountable. You're going to see how effective you are or aren't. At every session, you're going to be rated with very sensitive scales on your empathy and helpfulness. And it's painful when you get failing grades, which most of you will a good bit of the time at first. And you have to come to 3/4 of the groups. It's not a drop-in group. You have to be committed to it. And it's probably not for all therapists, because the techniques are hard to learn. They're amazing once you've got them mastered. And they look simple, but they're challenging. And like learning to the piano, you have to do a lot of practice. Well, I will shut up. And so again, if they want to join this dynamic, exciting, free of charge and mind-blowing new group, they should contact Rhonda at Feeling Great. Together, we'll say it.
Okay.
Feeling Great Therapy Center.com. And if you're from Australia, it's CENTER, not TRE. Center.
Great, thanks.
And now, back by popular demand. Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome listeners and everyone to episode 216. I imagine you're doing the Hello Rhondas because we've gotten a lot of answers on our survey, and most people are very positive regarding that funny Hello Rhonda.
Yeah, we really appreciate your feedback. The original person who told me to stop it thought I had permanently stopped it and wrote a thank you so much. Now I'll refer people back to the podcast. But we got tons of people, and we're so tickled and grateful, saying they like the goofy Hello Rhondas, and they like a little goofiness, and they don't think that professionals have to be so somber and heavy all the time. That was music to my ears.
Yeah, we would definitely agree with that. Yeah, here are some of the things that people wrote in. Bertha wrote, "Good morning, Dr. Burns. I am a 55-year-old African-American woman working as an essential worker, housing homeless veterans and families in Los Angeles County." And she writes, "Be you. Continue the Hello Rhondas."
Thank you, Bertha.
Yeah, and then Matt wrote, this is Matt A. "Hello Rhonda is the highlight of my week." So thank you, Matt.
That's great. And then we got we always get beautiful emails about Rhonda and how much you help people, not only just through your wonderful weekly dialogues with David and your warmth and your happiness, your joy, but when you've done personal work, it's really been scoring home runs for people. Maybe you can read that email as well.
Okay, I'm only reading it because you're asking me to, because it's kind of embarrassing for me. But Angela Pooch, who is a team therapist, wrote about that episode 192, which we called Matter and Antimatter. "I've listened to all the podcasts, and so many of them are moving and all of them are helpful. But so far, in this particular one, episode 192, Matter, Antimatter, has been the most impactful for me personally. I couldn't stop crying. My heart was so touched because I realized this thought, I don't matter, is the core belief that has caused me the most pain in my life. In fact, it at one time led me to self-destructing behavior and suicidal thoughts. I could relate 100% to you, Rhonda, even to feeling I'm unimportant to David because we've only met a couple of times, and I realized that David has met thousands of people. Now I have many positive thoughts to crush I don't matter from you all, Rhonda, Matt, and David. Not only self-acceptance and self-defense, but also I can examine the evidence and look to that email. These all combined will remind me of the truth when the lying distortions come. After all, we all know that I'll relapse, just like Rhonda did. Thank you so much for this amazing podcast. I'm so glad you, Rhonda, shared with David and went the extra mile doing this in-depth work together with Matt. And Matt, that part about protection was mind-blowing. My only criticism is that you guys made me sob so much my nose ran. It's all stuffed up and I went through a whole box of tissues. People will now judge me thinking I have coronavirus. Just kidding. I love humor too. So thank you, Angela. That was a really beautiful email.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The work that you did was beautiful. And I just was working on the part of the podcast. We're talking about healthy negative feelings and was thinking about, how sad I am to have lost our little cat, Obi, about a year ago or a couple of years ago. And I just loved him so much. And he didn't he didn't really matter. He was just a wild cat living in the woods as best he could, and we used to chase him out of our yard, and nobody cared about him whatsoever. And then, as you know, he came to our back door wounded one day, and he was on the verge of death, and my heart kind of went out to him, and we saved him and brought him to the vet and had surgery. And he went from being a predator, paranoid. He was hostile and bitey at first. He was terrified of us, and he came to love me just so tremendously, and I loved him just so tremendously, and still do. And when I go jogging, as I did today, I call out his name, and I know he won't come out from behind a tree, but I think, well, maybe if there's a cat heaven, he'll hear me when I shout out his name, and he'll hear it and realize that how much I loved him. But he, in a way, he didn't matter. He was just a stray cat. But
then because you loved him, your love made him matter. He mattered to you and to your wife.
Yeah. He made me see that what matters isn't your specialness, but maybe in his case, it just his being, the love that he had for me, and the joy that we had when we were together, that was just unbelievable. And he taught me, which I've said so many times in workshops and on podcasts, that when you no longer need to be special, life becomes special. And boy, that once you get that, it's really mind blowing.
Yes, I think I told you once before. I put that sentence on my bulletin board, and I look at it every day.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's just so true. But we drift out of enlightenment and get this panic, thinking we're not good enough. We have to be so special to be happy and fulfilled, and the truth is just the opposite.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into these great questions we've been getting. I'm going to
start crying right now.
Yeah, it is tearful. Yeah,
it is.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, when I finished doing that work, I felt tremendous love for you and Matt, and just so much gratitude, and I feel so honored to be able to work with you guys.
Yeah, I saw Marilyn the other day too. She dropped by the house. She's doing surprisingly well. She's always wondering, when's the cancer going to be overwhelm her, but it's been like 3 years now, and she's still feeling good. And they give her these MRIs of her brain and her liver and her ribs all the time, and it seems like she has metastases, in various places, which is frightening, and yet she continues to just feel really, really good. So it was a joy seeing her.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, we sat on the back deck and shared a sandwich. She had to come down to Stanford to have her, see the oncologist and have her MRIs and all of that.
That's cool. Well, here's our first Ask David question, and it's from Oliver, and he asks, can a thought be thought of as moral or immoral? And he asks, in many podcasts and articles, you use thou shalt not kill to demonstrate morally should statements, which is one of the 3 valid should statements in English. I'm still somewhat confused about this concept, though. To tell you where I get stuck, I've come up with 3 thought experiments. Imagine the following situations in which a should statement may come to mind. Here's situation 1. Lisa stole some money from a grocery store. When arrested by the police, Lisa said with tears, I should not have stolen the money. I feel ashamed for what I've done. In this case, it's obvious that I should not have stolen the money is a morally should statement, and also a legal should statement, because Lisa did something that violates the law and her moral principle.
And then he asked me to comment on that, and that I certainly agree. There's, just to refresh you listeners, there's 3 valid uses of should in the English language. There's the moral should, like thou shalt not kill, like the 10 Commandments. There's the legal should. You should not steal. You should not drive down the freeway at 100 miles an hour because it's against the law. And then there's the laws of the universe should. If I draw this pen, which you can watch, it should fall, and it did because of the laws of the universe, the law of gravity. But aside from that, most of the shoulds that people bring to therapy that cause depression and anxiety, like I should be better than I am, are not valid should statements. But you're right, Oliver. In this case, this woman is her should can be classified as a legal should and also a moral should. Now we'll have another 2 thought experiments here, and you listeners can guess the answer before I give you our answer.
Okay, situation 2. One day, Bob went to a clothing store to buy a suit.
Why didn't you say Walmart?
I didn't want to give them advertising.
Oh.
One day, Bob went to, Walmart to buy a suit. When he was passing by a shelf, a thought appeared in his mind. What would happen if I steal this suit? I really want it, but I don't have much money. When he came back home, he talked to himself. I shouldn't have felt the urge to steal things, and I shouldn't have thought about stealing the suit. Okay,
now listeners, before Rhonda and David give your assessment, write down on a piece of paper or just answer in your mind's eye, is that a valid should statement? I should not have thought about stealing the suit. Is that a laws of the universe should? Is that a legal should? Or is that a moral should? Or is it perhaps not a valid should? So just take a minute and see what you think. Okay. So what do you think, Rhonda?
Well, I think there's a difference between the thought that he's having that he didn't put into action and a thought that he puts into action. And I think we have to differentiate the difference between the two of them. And so it's kind of not a valid should statement since he thought about it, but he didn't act on it. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. In the United States, we have freedom of thought. And you're free to have any kind of thoughts you want, including violent thoughts and immoral thoughts and illegal thoughts. And none of that is illegal. None of that is immoral. It's just the way humans are programmed and just natural. When we get ticked off at someone, we want to kind of blow their brains out or kick them in the stomach or some such thing. But it's exactly what you say. It only becomes a moral should or a legal should when you act on it. But you can think.
And you think people are programmed to have violent urges, but then they're conditioned not to act on them?
Oh, I don't know about that. That's too fancy. That's above my pay grade. But I do think human beings are definitely programmed to have violent urges as well as very loving urges, and we'll come up to that in a later question, which we'll have on probably the next Ask David, a really cool question about violent, rageful urges that most of us have from time to time and what to do about them.
Okay, well, here is situation number 3. Lucy was buying fruit at a grocery store when she found that a man was taking an apple off the shelf and hiding it in his clothes. Obviously, the man was stealing the apple. Lucy was very angry and said, "That man shouldn't steal things from the grocery store. It's not right." In this case, Lucy didn't steal the apples, the man did. But Lucy made a moral judgment about the man's behavior. It's not about Lucy's behavior. Then is this a should statement that's valid for Lucy?
Okay, put on a piece of paper if you think this is a valid should statement. Lucy had the thought he shouldn't be stealing the apple, and you think that's a moral should, laws of the universe should, a legal should, or an invalid should statement. Okay, and hopefully you all have your conclusions, and this is probably not rocket science either. What do you think, Rhonda?
Well, stealing is against the law, so it was a legal should.
Yep.
But then I wonder, did Lucy have follow up with, another should statement, maybe this is going off, should I tell the store manager? Should I let the man, do what he, should I just leave him in peace?
Sure.
That would be another part of it.
Those are other issues, and I'm not a moralist, so I'm not going to address them. If somebody came as a patient and said they were troubled by that, then I can definitely give them some help with it. But I remember that the first time I worked with our hero and friend Matt May, he had seen a father coming out of a hospital kind of shout angrily at his son, or I don't know if he slapped his son. And Matt was profoundly disturbed. And that night, he was the only one who came to the Tuesday group, so we just did some kind of personal work together. And we'd never done that before, and it was a tremendous session because he was involved in should statements. What should he have done? And it was a very, very powerful session. I think it was the thing that turned him into wanting to be a team therapist. And then, of course, he blossomed into becoming a fantastic therapist. But yeah, this is certainly a valid should statement. And then what we're going to do about it is quite a different matter. So. Thank you for that, Oliver. I love it when people think about some of the ideas that we're teaching at a little deeper level, because a lot of them are just practical issues, but some of them are philosophical issues as well, and it's fun to address your questions. And now we've got another great should one coming up from Vincent.
It's from Vincent, and he said, I have suffered from depression for about 3 years, and I say to myself, I should have gotten better sooner. Isn't this should appropriate? And then he elaborated, what is it with shoulds related to recovery from depression? Because who really wants to suffer through this agony? Greetings from Geneva.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you, Vincent. And again, just to give you a quick solution to this, and we'll address the formal should piece of it. But one way to get out of should statements is to say it would be preferable rather than it should be the case, or I wish it were the case rather than it should be the case. So if you were to tell yourself, it would be great if I had recovered from depression sooner, that would be valid. But when you say I should have recovered from depression sooner, that's not a valid use of the word should, because it's not a moral should, it's not a legal should, and it's not a laws of the universe should. Now there's a lot of ways to confront should statements. Karen Horney, the feminist psychiatrist, really did a lot of the teaching on should statements in the 1950s. Her book, like The Tyranny of the Shoulds, was helpful to a lot of people, including my mother, who was, I think, a little depressed and found that book helpful. And also Albert Ellis from New York really thought that most human suffering comes from internal shoulds. I should be better than I am, and external shoulds, like you shouldn't be like that, and you've got no right to think that or to say that. The external shoulds cause hostility and war. The internal shoulds cause depression and guilt and shame, and sometimes even suicidal urges. The statement, I should have gotten better sooner is not only self-defeating, it's self-defeating because you'll feel guilty and ashamed. You'll not only be depressed, but you'll be ashamed of being depressed. So it's going to bum you out to use that word. But it's not really true that you should have gotten better before you got better. And this may seem kind of nonsensical, but let's think of all the people who have recovered from depression. Would you agree that there was a time before they recovered? Would you agree to that?
Yes.
And would you agree there was a time when they recovered?
Yes.
And there was a time after they recovered?
Yes.
Okay. Now, should they have recovered during the time before they recovered or during the time when they recovered?
During the time when they recovered.
Exactly. So if you say, I should have recovered sooner, you're telling yourself something that is not true. See, there are things that cause recovery. And in team therapy, I know exactly what causes recovery. And that's why I can cause it to happen so fast now compared with the early days of therapy. And I know people will recover exactly at the moment, that you've reduced their resistance to recovery. That we do with the new team therapy that people can read about in my book, Feeling Great, which, by the way, I forgot to plug it. It's available for sale now on Amazon. So look it up and buy yourself a copy because it may be very helpful to you personally. But the first thing is you've got to reduce the resistance to recovery. Freud was right. Resistance does exist and it's real. And if you don't eliminate it, people will remain stuck. The only thing Freud was wrong about was the cause and cure for resistance. He did us a favor by saying, this is something we've got to think about. Unfortunately, he spent his life trying to solve the puzzle of resistance, and he was not successful. But we believe now we do have the solution to that. And so that's step one in recovery. And step two in recovery is using powerful techniques to prove to yourself that the distorted thoughts that cause your depression are not true. And the very instant you stop believing those thoughts, that will be your exact moment of recovery. And so until you or someone has helped you reduce or eliminate your resistance, and until someone has helped you see how to crush the thoughts that cause your depression, like I'm a loser, I'm no good, I should be better than I am, that will be your moment of recovery. And now we hope in the future people will be able to recover much faster than in the past in a matter of a handful of sessions rather than in a handful of years. So I hope that's helpful to you, Vincent.
Do you think that people can assess and reduce their resistance on their own?
Yes, I do, but I'm not 100% certain of it. That's why I wrote the new book, Feeling Great. I actually have more faith in individuals who don't have therapists to recover quickly than individuals who do have therapists. And that's why I'm going directly to the general public, because most of the general public are just grateful to try out new techniques that might be helpful, because most of them they don't belong to schools of therapy. Do you see? But
yes.
When I'm trying to teach therapists, there's a mountain of issues that get in the way of their learning, because most of them belong to cults. Therapists, schools of therapy are actually cults with cult leaders. And they believe, to my way of thinking, pretty goofy things some of the time, but the followers are committed to these things.
But David, wouldn't people say the same about you? That people are committed to you, and that team therapy is a cult?
Absolutely, and there's plenty of truth in that too, and that's why I put so much emphasis on measurement and science, that this is a science-based technology. And if you're measuring at the start and end of every therapy session, then I say you're no longer a cult member, you're a scientist, and you've got my tremendous respect. But if you're making claims about your treatment, you're not measuring, then you don't have my respect. You don't have any real credibility. But now I got lost. Where were we?
That's a good answer.
Oh yeah.
I think we're done with this.
Yeah. Well, the main thing is, yes, I think people can pick up a book like Feeling Great, or the app that I'm developing with Jeremy, and later with your help too, I hope, and with Alex Clark. And I believe people will also, and this is what I'm super excited about, be able to learn this from our app. In fact, we've got some preliminary results already. It's just a small N. Eventually, we'll have hundreds and thousands of people using the app. But we just had about a dozen people using the part on assessment of resistance, and 11 of the 12 were just blown away by it. one person was very angry and didn't get it and thought this is stupid and a waste of time. And we've got to contact her and see what she was thinking. But it was overwhelmingly enthusiastic. And so
that's great.
To me, there's just no doubt in my mind that people will be able to use the Feeling Great app as well as the Feeling Great book. And if you do the exercises, I think many people will get quite a boost in mood.
I know this is off the subject from the Ask David's. Just one more question about your app. Could someone use the app if they have relationship issues, or is it for mostly depression and anxiety?
Well, the first part's going to be on depression and anxiety, and then we're going to have more apps, more pieces to it. One will be the relationship piece, which will be radically different from the depression piece. It's going to be funny, it's going to be challenging, it's going to be wild. And then we'll also have a whole series of modules on all the different anxiety disorders. We just have tons of things to share with people. But the cool thing is we're having so much fun doing it, and with the computer, with interactive exercises, we can show them video. I found 2 hilarious Spirit Fantasy videos. One with Melanie, who thought, she'll tell other people who will judge me. I don't know if you remember that one. And
I do remember.
And also we have Christine on a fantasy date with May in a session, and she has this crushingly severe shyness, and so she's afraid that on a date, her date will ask her some intellectual question that she won't be able to answer. And so I created a Feared Fantasy date. Matt and I were co-therapists, and Matt is going to be your date, and let's see how you do when he asks you a real intellectual question. So she's all trembling with anxiety and insecurity, and then he asks her something like, "Well, what do you think about the impact of geographical changes in the history of South America on the evolution of societal structure among the indigenous people?" And she just spazzes out, and she's flooded with insecurity and turns bright red and has no idea what to say. So she kind of gets an F, and then I said, let me show you how it's done. And then I played her role, and Matt asked me the same question. And then I said something like, I don't give an SH about your stupid question. You sound like a pretty boring person. Let's talk about something exciting. And then she burst into laughter and kind of got her enlightenment.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to should statements.
Yeah.
This is from Charles, and he writes, "First off, I want to say thank you. Your work has been helping me through my anxiety. However, I've struggled with the podcast 108, Do You Have a Self? The concept of no self shot my anxiety way up and made me feel hopeless. It made me feel almost as if I was not real, that there is nothing worth striving for. I love helping people, but I feel like I don't have a purpose if I don't have a self. It makes me feel worse than before."
Right. Well, I'm so sorry, Charles, and I want you to know that's why I removed the chapter from my new book, Feeling Great. I had a new chapter, Do You Have a Self? Do You Need One? And I thought it was crystal clear, and I found that people who read it, including a couple people whose IQs are in the genius range, I'm pretty sure, could not grasp it and were terribly threatened by it. And so I pulled it out because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And there are great chapters in the new book that will not threaten you, that show that yourself can't be judged by someone else. People can't validly disapprove of you. They can judge something specific you do. Like people might judge me on this podcast, and then they might judge, "Oh, David, you wandered from the subject too many times." And well, that's true. I do wander from the subject. Some people might like it, and some people might not like it. And maybe a professional podcast coach could persuade me to be more concise, and that would be fine. But that would not upset me at all. You only get upset when you say, oh, because I have this tendency to be too wordy or too overweight or too whatever, therefore I'm no good. That's generalizing to the self. And all the pain comes from thoughts about the self. And so I show that you can't judge a person's self. And that doesn't threaten anyone, but I don't go to the last step and say, in addition, the whole concept of the self is not only baloney, it's hurtful, and it's a waste of time. But most people can't take that last step. And it was the same thing with the Buddha. He talked about the great death of the self. And yet of apparently more than 100,000 followers he had, only 3, it was rumored, experienced enlightenment or could understand what he was saying. And so he was kind of lonely and frustrated too, because people couldn't get it. And what he was trying to say was so simple and basic, people couldn't grasp it. And last week we talked about Ludwig Wittgenstein and how
we did the last Ask Davids.
Yeah, and he struggled from the same loneliness, because what he was trying to say was pretty much the exact same message. But it was applied to the problems of philosophy, and people couldn't get there was only 7 people in the world could get it when he was alive, and he was so frustrated and disappointed. That's why he never once attempted to publish anything when he was alive, and everything came out. They found it like a metal box under his bed after he died. They found these notes and published them. And amazingly, they contain the solutions to all the problems in philosophy. But it's still hard for people to get what he had to say, because what he had to say was something actually that a 2nd or 3rd grader would grasp quickly. It's just so simple that people can't get it. And so I've temporarily given up trying to persuade people that the idea that you don't have a self is nonsensical. You see, the thing isn't that you don't have a self. The thing is that the concept of a self is meaningless mumbo jumbo. But people can't grasp really what that means. In the new book, Feeling Great, I do talk about the 4 great deaths of the self. The Buddha talked about 1 great death. There's actually 4 great deaths, and each of them is painful and frightening, but puts you kind of into a rebirth or a new kind of paradise. And so you might, Charles, enjoy that in the new book, but please accept my apologies. And to this day, I'm trying to figure out how to bring this idea that the self doesn't exist to life in a way people can grasp it and accept it. I haven't had a self for a long time, and boy, it's a relief. But every now and then, my self comes back to life, and then I suffer. Like I feel like I have to defend some position I've taken. I have to argue with somebody. I feel guilty or ashamed or anxious or threatened because I think I have this self that has to be so special and it has to be protected. And then I go back into enlightenment and let it die. Did I ever tell you my table tennis story?
How you wanted to quit being a psychiatrist and become a professional table tennis player?
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, that was
pretty recently.
Yeah, that was one thing, that was kind of cool. Once I realized I didn't have a self, I realized I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just someone who went to medical school and did psychiatric residency training. But I'm not a this or a that. And all of a sudden it freed me up to have some fun in life. My little cat, Obi, he didn't have a self. I didn't have a self, but we sure loved hanging out together.
Yeah.
Like when you have no self, life becomes like a banquet of joy.
It's kind of free. It's freeing, isn't it?
Yeah. So and anyway, we'll probably come back to that, but thank you for that.
I think we will.
And again, I just want to apologize for hurting your feelings. Your anxiety, your confusion is very common and very understandable. You think that the self is some special thing that gives meaning to your life, and you're afraid that without it, that somehow you couldn't help people. I mean, I've been able to help people 10 times better since I got rid of myself. Because when people criticize me, it doesn't bother me most of the time. And I like that fellow who wrote in and said, F you, after I sent out an announcement of my book, and I just responded to him with warmth and said, wow, I must have done or said something that really ticked you off. And if you tell me you'll be my teacher, I can learn from you. And we had a fantastic exchange. And it was just
and just the way you say it, it's so sincere. Sometimes when people say things like what you just said, they sound kind of phony. Or
they almost always sound phony. Who's that guy from India who's on TV all the time? He's real famous. He wears goofy glasses, and he kind of
Deepak Chopra.
Yeah.
He's very popular.
He's very popular, and the more popular they are, the more I tend to see them as just a little bit on the funny side. Now, aren't you, Deepak? And if he'd admit it, then I think he has stature. But I don't think he'd admit it.
Well, a lot of people say it as if they mean it. Not just him, but even
they try to con people.
Session, where a patient criticizes the therapist, and the therapist says, "Oh, I'm so grateful you said that."
Oh yeah, and it's just a bunch of malarkey. They're not grateful. They're pissed off and they're anxious and they're upset.
Angry and ready to retaliate.
Did I tell you about Sister Sheila Flynn?
No.
She was at my clinic in Philadelphia. Just loved her. Unfortunately, she died. I guess of old age, but she was a Catholic nun in this branch of Catholicism where you work in the world. Great. So she wanted to come to my clinic and learn to be a great therapist because she wanted to help people with addictions and things like that. We loved having her at the clinic. She was a very vulnerable and tender and warm, compassionate woman. But she used to go to India and meditate in silence, sometimes for 10 days. Once she meditated in silence for 30 days, and she said it was really, really rough. I think because she had a tendency toward depression and like that. But she said that there was this guru there, and people would, you'd go up to the guru and say a few things to him, and then he would tell you what you do next to achieve enlightenment, type of thing. I guess that's what gurus do. One of these days I'm going to put on some robes and sit around some flowers and see if people will come up to me, and then I'll mutter wise things to them. But at any rate, this fellow came up.
I just have that image in my head now.
And he said to the guru, please help me. I'm trying to become enlightened, but people seem to think I'm kind of phony, and I'm trying to become more sincere. What can you give me some words of guidance, type of thing? And he was sounding kind of like a phony in this little speech he had, and the guru leaned forward and put his hand on his head as if to bless him, and says, "My son, your problem is that you're not nearly phony enough yet." I thought that was good. Do you get it?
Interesting, ironic. Well, that's great.
You're trying so hard to be special. So let's see. Do we have one?
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah. Okay. On to Michelle.
This is from on to Michelle. She asks, "How is your requirement that new patients must agree to not make any suicide attempts for the rest of their lives any different to a suicide contract, which you mentioned are not effective?" That's the headline. And here's the body of her comment. She wrote, "I've just listened to the episode 102 on helping the suicidal patient and found it really interesting and useful, but I do have a few questions. First, how is your requirement that the patient agree to not make any suicide attempts for the rest of their life any different to a suicide contract, which you mention are not effective? Also, you talk about doing this assessment at the intake and making non-attempts a condition of therapy. If the patient-client agrees to this, why then do you continue to monitor suicidal thoughts in each session in the brief mood survey? Presumably because the agreement is no guarantee of cessation of thoughts. Surely if you've told them it's a condition of therapy with you to not make any attempts, then they'd be likely to not tell you about them even if they did occur. And I don't see how setting the initial ground rules resolves the problem. And lastly, when suicidal thoughts urges, or fantasies do come again in the brief mood survey, how do you handle it then? Do you tell them you'll end therapy and say, but you promised? Looking forward to your reply, Michelle.
Well, those are great questions, because whenever you teach something that's a little on this, let's say, subtle or sophisticated side, it's so easy to misinterpret it or not really understand it when you try to grasp it. And these kind of questions can flesh things out. And let me also say that when I'm teaching, I'm just teaching, what seems to me to be the truth. I'm not the ultimate, expert on much of anything. But I have learned a lot from my clinical practice and experiences, some positive and some negative, all opportunities for a lot of growth. But the first thing is the most important. This usual suicide contract that they use in hospitals and daycare settings, make the patient agree while they're in therapy they won't make a suicide attempt. I think it's fairly widespread knowledge that this is totally ineffective, because if patients then decide to commit suicide, they'll say, "Well, I won't be in therapy anymore, so I'm leaving therapy." And if they're willing to kill themselves, they're certainly willing to break their promise to you.
Right.
So maybe it helps the staff feel a little better, or maybe gives them some legal protection conceivably, but it's not effective. My agreement with patients is kind of designed primarily for patients with borderline personality disorder, or anyone who's actively suicidal, but many of the ones who make frequent suicide threats and attempts have borderline personality disorder. And they're constantly threatening the therapist, and you better do X, Y, and Z, or I'll kill myself. I can remember one of my earliest tough patients, one who had a fantastic outcome, by the way. But I remember once he called me, and he said, "If you don't agree to give me electroconvulsive therapy tomorrow morning, I'm going to take my car and run it into people in the local shopping mall, and I'm going to kill as many people as I can." And
so he wasn't just suicidal; he was homicidal.
Yeah, both. Yeah, very, very, very violent. And it was profoundly disturbing to me.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of these patients, because Aaron Beck's clinic used to refer patients to me all the time from his clinic. He was on the 5th floor of the Gerard building with his mood clinic, which was very new at the time. And then I was on the 3rd floor with my private practice. And he just sent tons of patients to me. I thought it was because he thought I was a great therapist. And then I learned later they sent me all the patients they didn't want. They were typically these suicidal patients with a borderline personality disorder. But it wasn't healthy, because, I'd be in a constant state of anxiety, and kind of like this ultimatums being issued to me all the time. And I finally decided that the solution to it was that I can't make my patients happy if I allow them to make my life miserable. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to go home on a weekend not knowing if some of my patients will be dead by Monday.
Right.
I want to have peace of mind and joy. And so I made the rule, which is much heavier than the day treatment thing, that if you want, this with new patients before I've accepted them, if you want to work with me, I have to know if you'll pay the price, because I have the tools to change your life. But if you want to work with me, you'll have to pay. And one price is that you have to agree never to make a suicide attempt for the rest of your life. And the reason for that is that if you agree to that, it will be almost impossible for us to fail in our work together. But if you don't agree with it, I can give you 100% guarantee my tools will not be helpful to you, and it will not be safe for me to treat you. It was kind of, and in addition, if you want to work on that, you're going to have to do psychotherapy homework, except, 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, except on the days that you're not in the mood.
Or then you have to do 30 minutes.
Yeah, and then you've got to do the 30 minutes. And this was kind of designed to infuriate patients with borderline personality disorder. And if they agreed to it, and most of them did, although they got explosively angry, then they would work, we'd form an alliance, and they would recover. And generally at the same rate as patients without borderline personality disorder. But if they didn't agree to it, then I encourage them to find some more intensive form of therapy, hospitalization, day treatment. I can't safely treat you and effectively treat you. And so that's the difference. And difference is you're really making the patient accountable rather than trying to help the patient. And paradoxically, I found that I was far more effective with way more patients when I decided to make them accountable. And then the other questions is that I measure then suicidal urges at the start and end of every therapy session, because most depressed patients have them, and if they suddenly spike, then that's something we need to work on together. But I never tell patients you're not allowed to have suicidal thoughts and feelings. Almost all patients who are depressed have those kinds of feelings. The whole issue, the focus is if you have them, then we can work on those together. And I have lots of ways to help patients. But it's that trust, that connection that makes all the difference between successful and unsuccessful therapy, particularly with suicidal patients. That's why we call it team therapy, because that teamwork is an important key to our success.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, here's the next one. Brian asks, I've done a few things that made me feel intensely guilty. The knowledge that I didn't do what I should have done led to a lot of guilt and shame and eventually depression. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this. So that's his headline, and here's the bulk of his email. Hello, David. Thank you so much for everything you do. I've listened to all of your podcasts and read most of your books, and I'm very grateful for the changes you, Rhonda, Fabrice, and the rest of the team have made to my life. I've just listened to this episode. Which one is he talking about?
Oh, it's probably one of the should.
Okay.
So we had a should statement thing lately.
We did.
Yeah, it's probably that one. Yeah.
Okay, and there's one thing I'm struggling with, which is the concept of the moral should. I've done a few things that made me intensely guilty. One in particular was not standing by and supporting a friend who needed people when he was going through a particularly hard time. My friend was angry and disappointed with me, and in hindsight, rightly so. He has since forgiven me, but I still struggle with it. I feel that supporting him was a moral should. The knowledge that I didn't do what I should have done led to a lot of guilt and shame, and eventually depression. You say that a moral should is valid, so therefore, I feel that my negative thoughts on this are not misguided but valid. I did something morally wrong, and I deserve to feel bad for it. I'm just wondering your thoughts about this. Thank you again, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you, Brian. Another tremendous question, and you're right that you can consider this to be a moral should, and most of us do violate moral shoulds or legal shoulds from time to time as well. And so the question would be not should you feel guilty or do you want to feel guilty, but how guilty do you want to feel? How many minutes a day and for how many days do you want to feel that way? Like what would you recommend to someone else? It sounds like you're feeling 100% guilty 100% of the time, and or something like that, 80% guilty most of the time, and it's making you depressed and miserable. Well, from your religious or spiritual beliefs, what have you ever heard the concept of forgiveness of sin? I know that that's a Christian concept. It's also a Jewish concept. Well, it is, because what it is in the Jewish religion is that if you hurt somebody, you're obligated to apologize with a humble heart on 3 occasions. And if they turn you down on all 3 occasions, then it's on them.
Right.
That's your duty, your obligation, and so you have to decide for yourself. How guilty do you want to feel? Would 10 minutes a day be sufficient? And then you could take 10 minutes, schedule it ahead of time, and just beat the hell out of yourself for 10 minutes, just tell yourself what a worthless, morally corrupt person you are, or whatever your thoughts are, and make yourself as guilty as possible. And then at the end of the 10 minutes, then you turn it off, stop being guilty, and lead a joyous and loving life. Or maybe 3 minutes, three times a day. The question is not, should you feel guilty? Healthy remorse is appropriate when you realize that you've hurt somebody, and you use that to develop a more loving relationship with the person. I personally myself can be insensitive at times. I've maybe been insensitive with you on occasion, Rhonda. I have with our colleague Jacob. I have with my son, who got very angry with me, and I couldn't see it at first. And then when I finally realized from his point of view, I felt tremendous remorse. And we use that as an opportunity to form a deeper and more loving relationship. And it's just been had a transforming effect on my life and on his life. So I think from any religious or psychological point of view, healthy remorse is healthy. But enough is enough. And if you get into feeling guilty all the time, then you're into unhealthy guilt, neurotic guilt. And that's not the result of a moral should. That's the result of relentless beating up on yourself. But if you want to do that, you can. It's just that no spiritual leader would I can't imagine any ever, recommending that.
And then just to follow up on that, so healthy remorse is healthy. Is it also healthy then to forgive someone who asks forgiveness?
If somebody asks me for forgiveness and they've hurt me, and I think they're honest about it, then I would definitely use that as an opportunity to talk, to share feelings, to get their point of view, and use that as an opportunity to get close.
And what if you're having healthy remorse and you ask forgiveness and the other person doesn't give you the forgiveness?
Well, then you can use the 5 secrets of effective communication or forced empathy and really try to see the world through their eyes, to disarm them, to support them, to let them know they have every right to be angry with you. And usually that will melt a person's heart pretty rapidly. You can only do what you can do. But if you use the 5 secrets skillfully, you've got a good 90 or 95% chance of using that as a way to get closer to the person than ever. But to come back to your interesting thought of forgiveness, I had a very rough falling out with a mentor in the past. And I felt pretty angry at the way I had been treated, which struck me as not morally correct, so just to put it like that. And I saw him doing the same to others he worked with. And to this day, people close to him reach out to me repeatedly and say, "Why don't you make amends with so-and-so?" And, and I always ignore them because this person has never come to me and said, "David, I'd like to ask your forgiveness for the mean-spirited and corrupt things that I did to try to hurt you early in your career." And I'm sure he never will. Narcissists have a tremendous difficulty asking for forgiveness or admitting that they're wrong or that they have bad impulses sometimes. But if someone comes with an open heart, then I give them everything I've got. But if someone's just trying to politicize or maneuver for position or whatever they're trying to do, I have no interest in that.
Mm-hmm. I really love that you made that distinction. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. And then I found so many people to support me. I don't need him anymore.
Right.
I have a blessing. I have Rhonda and Jeremy in my Tuesday group and Jill Levitt, and the list goes on and on of just loving, brilliant people. I just count my riches every day, and you're part of my riches, Rhonda.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. You're part of mine too. Okay, here's the last one.
Well, we can save this
David's.
because we're kind of an hour into it. This last one is.
The last one is so good.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And it's
sure.
so relevant. Wait, this podcast is going to be coming out November 2nd. Oh, is that true? No, November 9th.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. This podcast is coming out November 16th.
Yeah.
So it will be after the presidential election. We'll know maybe the votes will be cast and counted. And
sure.
Here's a really great question for us.
This is a great one.
For especially right after the election. And this is from Carrel. And I think it's a woman, Carrel, although it might be a man the way the name's spelled. And Carrel writes, I'm a Democrat in Texas. How can we use disarming to heal the political rifts in our country? How does one find agreement across that ever-widening divide?
Well, this is a good question, and I'm not probably the world's greatest expert in it. I have a few humble possible contributions. First, I don't ever do things on a general level, only on a specific level. So if there's one person that you want to heal the divide with, then you could use the relationship journal and the 5 secrets of effective communication to try to see the world through that person's eyes, finding truth in their point of view, stroking them rather than arguing and trying to put them down, which seems to be what 99% of people are doing 99% of the time. The second point is, before doing that, you have to make a decision. Do I want to get closer to this person? And if you do, then there's a lot of powerful tools you can use, but you may not want to. I think humans have 2 basic motives. And our next Ask David, with this fantastic rage question from Natasha, will go into this more deeply. But I think humans have ugly, dark motives that are genetically inherent in the human nature. And humans have loving, positive, peaceful, brilliant, constructive motives that are also fundamental to human nature. And these 2 forces seem to be at war right now. And increasing. The urges toward violence and toward hatred are right now increasing in the world. I think Biden is doing a really excellent job of saying that he would like to bring people together to move in a position of peace and love and for people to see ourselves as one. The Buddhists say that the source of evil, the meaning of evil, is your belief that you're separate from the universe. So that, you and I are separate, and so your interests are separate from mine, and I may have to kill you, and I see you as this bad evil object. But if you want to get close to someone, if you care about them, then you can do a lot to heal that divide. But right now there is so much tension, so much frustration, that sometimes we move in the other direction, resorting to violence, and that's when we go into a state of war. And I'm fearful that and I can't say where things are going to be on this day after the election, but in the days approaching the election, there was more and more violence erupting, and more people wanting the solution of you're inferior to me, I'm going to label you, and I have the right to punish or even kill you. And they're troubled times. My best friend growing up was a kid in the neighborhood, Vance Ondal. And he rejected me at some point, like about in 5th grade or 4th grade, which I never knew why. I always just thought he was fantastic. He was so smart, and we would hunt for ghosts together. And he was just really neat. I just loved the guy. And I can remember we were about 6 or 7. We were walking down the sidewalk, but he was so smart. And he says, the world is heading into war now, and we're going to erupt into war with Korea in a few days. And he was just like 6 years old, but I know his father was this brilliant guy. And sure enough, 2 or 3 days later, we were in war with Korea, and hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. And I think Vance Ondal might say the same thing to me today. David, we're edging closer, unfortunately, to war, to the forces that are urging for war, and I just hope it doesn't happen.
Me too. Oh, seems like that's a profound way to end this podcast.
Sobering.
So
let's hope for the forces of light and love to win the day.
Let's hope. Okay, thank you, everyone. Until next time.
Bye-bye, Rhonda.
Bye. Bye, David. Thank you so much for all of this wisdom.
Yeah, it's always a joy to hang out with you. Absolutely.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this episode under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. The theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donzel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.